Hello everyone and welcome back. Alex here, and today I'm going to do a skill review for the Necromancer. And today I'm going to be focusing on an elite skill in the Curses line called Plague Signet. And this elite skill actually opens up a lot of possibilities in using conditions offensively. So let's read it real quick. So Plague Signet, for a 1 second cast time and a very quick for a Signet recharge at 4 seconds. It's a elite Signet, and you transfer all negative conditions with 187% of the remaining durations from yourself to target foe. This is at Curses level 13. Now, the thing about Plague Signet is that, one, it requires no energy to cast, which is nice. Two, it's a Signet, so it bypasses a lot of the counter hexes that are used against casters, namely things like backfire, as well as it's able to transfer all of your negative conditions, not just 1 or 2 or maybe up to 3 if you're using Plague Signet and you have a high Curses level. This sends all of them as long as you're Curses 4 or above. This works really well in any kind of condition based build, which I'm running here. Now, the thing about this particular build is that it's really about synergy. Again, when I have done skill reviews before, I always make a point of synergy, but with a condition-based build, it's all about synergy and how to use those conditions offensively to achieve usually a big spike damage when you're used combined with a Mesmer's build called Fragility, which each time an opponent is afflicted with a condition or condition is removed, they're going to take some amount of damage, in this case 11, and this is at illusion level 6. Not very high, but enough to get the job done. Now, in this particular build here, I'm also using Awaken the Blood, which is a +2 to blood magic and +2 to curses, which I'm using both, and that really amps up my effectiveness as long as I don't use any sacrifice skills, or I use sacrifice skills that are on the very low end, like 8%. Because if you use a high sacrifice skill such as Blood is Power, you could easily kill yourself in 1 or 2 goes. Unless that's your intention, and there are builds that do that, sacrifice builds, where that's the whole point. But in this case, that's not what I want to do. So in this build here, I have weakness. I have poisons, where actually I poison myself. I can feed that into Plague Signet. I have weakened armor. The other key thing is that you can also use the conditions that are afflicted to your team. And there are a few skills where you can actually draw the condition from your teammate to yourself and then feed that into Plague Signet and send it to the enemy. So one popular one, as I just mentioned, actually has the same name, Draw Conditions. It's actually in the Monk protection line, and as you pull conditions off an ally, you actually gain a little bit of health, and then that can feed into Plague Signet. Another one, and actually better one for the Necromancer, is the Eye of North skill called Foul Feast. It does the same thing, but you also gain a little bit of energy as well. Also, it's in your Soul Reaving primary line, which means it can also be used along with runes that are on your armor, while in the case of a monk secondary, you don't have runes to power up your protection skills. So that's a key thing, and that's what makes Foul Feast nice when you're running as a Necromancer primary. Now, if this was in reverse and you were a monk primary, then Foul Feast would be of no use to you whatsoever, because you could still use Plague Signet and it would be almost just as effective. But Foul Feast, since it's not in the monk primary line, you would use Draw Conditions instead. But you then, in that case, you could use runes, and you could use other skills in the protection line as well. So there's a lot of synergy there. It really depends what the primary profession of your character is. If it's Necromancer, you go with Foul Feast. If you're a monk, then you use Draw Conditions or something similar. One point, though, when you're running with heroes and henchmen, they have no idea what you're doing. So if you have henchmen or heroes that have condition removal, such as Draw Conditions, Mend Ailment, Restore Condition, things like that, they have no idea that the conditions you have are actually the conditions that you want, and they'll heal them faster than you can trigger your Plague Signet. So you can easily actually kind of gimp your character a bit if you have heroes or henchmen that have condition removal. So you want to make sure that they don't, and that the conditions you have are the conditions that you want. But also realize that all the condition removal duty is going to be on your character, and if you fall behind, then that can actually affect your team a bit. So anyways, that being said, let's head out here to Ferndale. Now there's a group of enemies out here that use a lot of conditions. They're wardens, and I think they'll be a pretty good example here. Okay, so now that we have the skills all set up, we're ready to head out here into Ferndale. Okay, so we're just going to beat up this first group of enemies out here. And one of the irritating ones is Warden of the Mind, because they have both Shatter Enchantment and Cry Frustration, and they can be a big issue for casters. So I'm going to move over here to the left. I'm not going to use Awaken the Blood yet, just in case he shatters me. And here we go. Okay, we're going to hex him. Okay, so we got one leaf. Okay, now we're going to send the bleeding back to him. Okay, and there's the spring. And down he goes. Okay. Right. So, any kind of condition that's on my team is a resource. And that resource I can use to send back to the enemy. And let me just check here. No condition removal, yep. Okay, now this group can be a little bit thorny up here, so I'm going to send a warrior out to grab aggro. Here they come. And one thing I keep not doing, which I need to do, is make sure I trigger fragility. Okay, fragility. Oh, and I got Cry of Frustration. Where's the mind? There's the mind right there. He cried frustration me again. Alright, I'm going to send him a care package. There we go. Yeah, that Warden in the Mind can be pretty irritating. But we got a lot of the conditions off, although I think one of my warriors bought it. Let's try this group up here. I see one warrior in mind, but I'm going to actually fire up my Awaken the Blood. Okay, off he goes. Okay, that's the trunk. We're going to on him. Okay, we're going to start. Okay, we got disease. Well, we can send that back. Actually, no, we can't. And actually, there's a reason for that, because they are running. I think it's desiccated flesh or diseased flesh, which is actually an elite. And let's see. We'll give it back to the vampire quarter there. And there we go. So actually I'm going to put my group over here. We'll get rid of this disease. Because it's disease, this actually recharges twice as fast. There we go. And just wait till this comes off. Okay, here we go. So I'm gonna do poison, and then I'm gonna send it over to this guy. Fragility, weakness, armor. I'll actually put barbs on him as well. Where's the mind? There's the mind. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Down it goes. There's the barbs. And down he goes. And let's see, I think there is a group of only up here, I believe. We have a Spirit of Brambles. Yep, and there's also Spirit of Laceration. Oh, okay, yeah, here's where bleeding can actually come in pretty well. Right there. Spreading the love. That's what it's about. There we go. Alright, put my group aside. We'll take off all of this disease. Whoa. There we go. This stuff off. And there we go. Okay, that's the last of the disease. So anyways, that's Plague Signet. And again, it's very good in drawing conditions off of your team and throwing it back, particularly when your team hits a trap and they are they're staggered and they have they're limping along and they have bleeding and they have everything else. You can just throw that right back at your enemy, and also your team has that condition off of them, which makes them more effective, particularly melee characters. So Terraza, Koss, the whole crew here. And it makes things a lot easier. So anyways, that's just a quick demonstration of the skill there. It's a very good skill, very good to play around with. And one thing to keep in mind as well, it is a Signet and it does synergize not just with fragility in the Mesmer line, but also a lot of the Signet type of stances like prescriptions and things like that, as well as the armor set. So if you're running a Mesmer primary and you can put on the runes that give you additional armor per Signet, well, this is another one that you can use to run a Signet build that you can also do conditions and things like that if you find yourself under a lot of conditions. So anyways, it's just one quick idea. It's definitely something to play around with, and it's a very good skill. It's a core skill you can find on all 3 campaigns, and it's definitely worthwhile to play around with a condition build. But of course, as I mentioned before, condition builds, one thing about condition builds is make sure that what you're targeting can actually be afflicted by conditions, not just stone elementals or things like that, where they can't bleed because they're made out of rocks. Well, then that doesn't work very well. So one other point about conditions, particularly in PvE and hard mode here, again, the enemies you're fighting against don't last very long, so you have to be kind of selective with some conditions. Normal DPS conditions such as poison, bleeding, disease, things like that, they're great, but usually your enemies could be dead long before they make a real difference. Other conditions such as weakness or weakened armor, blind, dazed, those are very good conditions because it actually shuts your enemy down. You know, a lot of those wardens of the trunk I put on enfeeble, and now they're suffering from weakness, and it cuts down the damage output by a lot, which makes it a lot easier for my team to manage when going up against melee type of characters. The other thing is that diseases also go through armor. So if you're dealing with some very high armored opponents that you're having a tough time with, conditions as well as DPS hexes, they bypass armor and they can go through the enemy fairly quickly. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the skill review. If you like it, please subscribe to the channel and I'll be sure to make some more videos. Thank you very much, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.